Coming up, a Living St. Louis special. With all that's going on in St. Louis, we've heard from a lot of experts and advocates and activists. Tonight, we hear from you. A kitchen table discussion that's too big for the kitchen table. Join us as a group of St. Louisans who are just meeting each other for the first time. Talk about the verdict, the protests, and the state of our community.
That is a part of being a man. From day one.
I disagree with that.
Never.
Coverage of issues vital to our region is supported in part by Emerson. I'm Jim Kirchherr, and we don't usually open programs with the picture postcard view of St. Louis behind us. This is where out-of-town reporters come to do their stand-ups. But we thought this time it was appropriate because of everything that's been going on in the city. The image and the reality of St. Louis is very complicated these days, and we want to dig into that. But not with, as we say, the usual suspects. We want to hear from people that we generally only hear from in quick little man-on-the-street sound bites, if that. That's who we wanted to listen to, and that's who we've invited. We actually do these kinds of conversations a lot in different neighborhoods. About once a week, the 9 Network is meeting and listening to people. We don't tape them or put them on TV. This time we did. Or were you out there?
I was out there.
Why?
I've been out there for the last 3 years, since August 2014, when Mike Brown was murdered. So I've never left the streets, and I was out the night that the non-guilty verdict came out.
You guys watching it on TV or what?
Social media, usually the news organizations.
What's going through your head as you're reading all that and watching some of that?
Well, the language already that's used at the table is going through my head. Murder, corral. I saw both sides of it, and the side I saw was a protester up in a policeman's face, screaming, calling him every name in the book, telling him how horrible, what a wretched person he was, and yeah, I didn't see the peaceful protester side of, I mean, I did in other parts, but I just think the language that we use is an important thing because it assumes things on both sides.
I saw what I saw on the news, and it was interesting to me because I was listening to the media reporting what was going on, and I didn't see what they saw. It was interesting because I saw the protesters over here. They seemed to be just standing there, and there was empty space between them and I guess whoever was reporting, but the media was trying to, it seemed to me, to lift up violence and portraying this as something that I wasn't looking at.
Are we seeing things, the same things, differently? Watching the same pictures, hearing the same reports, and getting different sense of what you're looking at or what I'm looking at or what you're looking at?
I think so. I've followed it on social media. I've watched a little bit on the news. I read the paper. It's quiet. You know, I don't like the shouting. I haven't really been directly affected by any of it, quite honestly. I don't understand all of it. A lot of what I've seen on the news has been peaceful.
I've been trying to figure it out. I mean, I understand the feeling of wanting to do something, and I am very sympathetic towards that, but I don't understand what the protests will do. I don't know what the end game is, and that makes it. But what I've seen looks very peaceful, and I don't have any problem with people protesting. I just am not sure how that fits in with change and making things better.
In American culture, to riot and protest, and not only is it in our culture, it's literally how we started. The Boston Tea Party was destroying property that did not belong to them.
I'm glad Jacob brought us a little bit of history. Sometimes, whatever's going on, we forget history. Does everybody here remember in the lessons of abolitionists?
Mm-hmm.
The first protesters, abolitionists, they weren't black. They were white.
Do I agree? Do I want things to be broken? Does anybody want things to be broken? Do we want commerce interrupted? No. But does it have to? Yes.
Yes. Yes.
Does it
most
have to?
definitely.
Yes. Something has to give. Something has to give. And if it takes for people to be uncomfortable, for people to be inconvenienced, I agree. Protesting and the right to stand up, that is a part of being American.
First Amendment.
From day one, from this country's inception, protest and not just a civil protest, but an uncivil protest is what got us, what caused our existence. And so it's going to continue to be that way because it is woven into the fabric of our beings as Americans. Right. So yes, when things go to a point where we're no longer being heard, where we're dying continually, unfairly, unjustly, then yes, as Americans, we will protest. We won't protest by guidelines. We're going to protest outside of those guidelines.
So I feel like it's getting to the point where people understand that something needs to change. Like I said, I don't know that the protest, I don't know that I would feel like being in a protest would change anything. I'm glad people are protesting, but I feel like it's getting close to a tipping point that, things need to change.
Yeah, but you and maybe me and other people are saying, you understand the protest, but you're not willing to go out there.
That is true.
And so are we complicit by not being part of the change, or is it just that we don't believe, and I don't mean to speak for everybody here, that one might not believe that's the way to make the change?
And I understand more than anybody else because I've been on both sides of the unrest. So
Tell me about that.
I've spent 9 years of my life as a St. Louis County police officer, and during the initial time of the unrest, I was holding the line just like all the rest of my other brothers and sisters in arms. So I understand, I know, and even on behind the shield, I empathize and support those on the other side.
We get that, and again, from social media, it's not necessarily the place where we're going to settle this, but you get the kind of tweet that says, Blue Lives Matter, they're not perfect, but they're putting their lives on the line to protect us. So can you be both? Can you support the police and still support the protesters?
100%, yes, absolutely.
Let's watch this.
And we're going to show a little bit of our militant side.
After the verdict, the protests began to gain momentum. This one took place that Sunday outside St. Louis Police Headquarters.
Let's bring it back. We're angry, but we're going to show some love. We're going to tell them that we're both love.
The previous night, there was a large, peaceful march through the Delmar Loop and up and down Skinker and back along Delmar. An estimated 450 people took part. Police were there, but they kept their distance and allowed the protest to take place. But after the organized march ended that night, there was conflict between police and smaller groups. On this and on other nights, there would be property damage, injuries, and arrests. This had all started Friday, September 15th, when Judge Timothy Wilson released his verdict in the case of former police officer Jason Stockley, tried for the murder of Anthony Lamar Smith after a police chase in 2011. The prosecution argued that Stockley planned to kill Smith, shot him, and then planted a gun. Stockley said he saw Smith with a gun and acted in self-defense. The judge's 30-page ruling went through the evidence point by point and said that based on his experience, an urban heroin dealer not in possession of a firearm would be an anomaly. The judge's verdict, not guilty, that the prosecution had not proved its case beyond a reasonable doubt. But for many protesters, there were no doubts. This was another case of a black man judged and executed by a white police officer without a trial.
Black folks say stop killing us. White folks say stop killing them.
And there have been a lot of white people in these organized protests supporting the message that Black Lives Matter.
And I don't feel like it's appropriate anymore to stand by and be silent.
So when we talk about justice, whether it's with the police, whether it's in our own communities, I mean, look at some of our communities. People were worried about buildings and windows being broken, but you can drive down almost any street in the city of St. Louis, and you can see broken dreams, broken houses. I don't see anybody taking up a love offering for those. We put our money into everything except those things that can truly make a difference in this country.
The protesters kept up at different locations to interfere with business and business as usual, to make people uncomfortable and inconvenienced. In many cases, the police kept their distance, allowing protesters to gather and march on streets and block intersections, but not interstates. But as time went on, protests were brought to new locations. Downtown, Clayton, St. Charles, the Billy Joel concert, the baseball game, the Galleria. And things have gotten complicated by arrests and police tactics after ordering crowds to disperse, with what has happened often shot on cell phones and shared to the world.
Can I ask why you just pulled out the one thing about the judge saying about an anomaly and didn't explain any of the rest of what happened?
A lot of people pointed to that particular sentence.
That's why she doesn't know what happened.
I
Because
do.
that's
Oh,
all
I
you
didn't
pulled out
want
of
you to
that.
misunderstand me. I do know what happened. I'm saying I didn't understand why a statement like that would justify his ruling, because as soon as he said that, I thought he was biased.
He was biased.
I think there's two scenarios here that are both credible. Let's put aside the specifics. Have cops ever planted a gun and shot somebody?
Yes.
Absolutely.
Have there ever been drug dealers armed
Absolutely.
who have put police in danger who needed to be shot? So we have two credible scenarios, and nobody here can say for sure that they know positively what happened. If we don't talk about the court case, if we don't talk about the judge, if we can talk about the evidence, and you can read the ruling is out there, what should we be talking about? We're moving forward. That's a done deal. We brought
can't
you
move
here.
forward. We can't move forward.
Okay,
We
can't move
can't
forward.
move forward.
Should we not be
Every
talking?
time something happens to black people, I'm so sick and tired of white people telling us, you need to move forward. You can't move forward. You haven't fixed what's in the past. We can't move forward. You got to fix what's in
Can
the past.
I ask how,
how do you fix
these
it, though?
protests are going to fix
The laws
that? The
need
man
to
is
be
not coming back
changed.
to life.
The laws
The
cover the
verdict
police.
is not going to be changed.
It's not going to be changed.
He's not
And you
gonna-
know what? If the issue is not addressed, we're going to revisit this thing over and over and over again. There's going to be protests.
But let's revisit it with, why do you want to hang your hat on somebody like him?
Why do you mean like him?
Do you think that my point is valid, that maybe using these protests and these concerns for the community might be better served on another hero other than the heroes that have been put up in the last 6 years?
No.
Okay.
And I say no because, and I heard you earlier saying you're unclear as far as what our message is or what the message is. Let me say that first. The message is stop killing unarmed black men. Flat out. Stop it. Black men or women. We don't want that to happen. At its most elementary point, stop that. You're speaking to like these individual cases, and why are we hanging? It's past these individual cases. It's I'm born and raised in St. Louis, North Side. No, I live less than 100 yards away from a drug house. So growing up in that neighborhood, being stopped by police, see what I had on me or whatever, that was a part of me growing up. Me just a kid walking down the street. I went to ROTC, I was in a uniform. In a military uniform, I would get stopped and to see what was in my pockets or something like that. Sat on the curb, hands underneath my butt. But I knew how to operate like that because I received a speech from my father, and this is how you engage with police, and this is I'm not sure if I'm not sure of the upbringing of a white male, but I'm not sure if that is the same dynamic is had within their household, within their raising. This is what happens when a police contacts you. This is, make sure you do this, make sure you do that.
Absolutely.
So now,
Stop and comply.
it's implied to comply, but I believe that we as black men receive a different type of instructions. I say all that, and I understand everything on the opposite side of the fence. I know the state of policing today and what it takes to police an area, and it's a lot of unconscious and conscious biases that take place within our policing right now that affects how these black men are dying. But that is what ultimately needs to be addressed so that we cannot continue dying at this clip. We shouldn't have to risk dying at all. I have a son. I shouldn't have to have fear of him coming back because of another officer's, what he thought he saw.
And I can understand that, but it's not inside me.
Absolutely.
Like it's inside you. I mean, I imagine that a lot of us kind of feel that way. We get it. I suspect that's why there's more white people out in these marches this time around. I just suspect that.
I guess maybe that, so I've been trying to figure out, what is the purpose of the protest? What will they achieve? Maybe what they will achieve is if there are more white protesters taking part, they will see more of how the police are interacting with people, because that's been problematic, right? The police seem to have used more force than they really need to.
There have been some issues.
Yeah.
Yes.
So if there are more people who are not typically targeted by the police and don't have that kind of relationship with the police, and they see, oh, this is happening, that maybe that is the way that it moves forward. I'm
going to show one more piece here because we've addressed it a little bit, and it may raise some issues.
It was after the September 16th march in the University City Loop ended, and after the marchers peacefully dispersed, that vandals smashed windows of dozens of businesses along Delmar Boulevard. The process of cleaning up, boarding up, and painting murals on the boards was swift, thanks to help from area residents. This is a strip of predominantly small, independently owned businesses, and some, like Plowsharing Crafts, are nonprofit businesses.
As you can see behind me, those are the broken windows that resulted from the violence after the peaceful protest on Saturday.
This Facebook video is of Richard Howard Wilms, executive director of Plowsharing Crafts. The store sells a variety of fair trade goods from around the world and is a ministry of the St. Louis Mennonite Fellowship. We asked Howard Wilms about the mood among merchants in the aftermath of the violence.
A lot of sadness expressed. I mean, people were generally of the feeling that, the protests, the peaceful ones, the nonviolent ones, were needed and important, and were expressing an ideal that most of us really support and want to see justice in this world. But the resultant violence done by a very small group of people, and we want to separate them from the vast majority of protesters who came out, caused the damage and really caused unfortunate stink and made it look bad for many, many people. And we're sad about that too, and that the message of the protest was lost, unfortunately, because of the violence that was perpetrated.
As for the protest theme of no justice, no profits.
We didn't skip a beat. In fact, our Sunday was 3 times better than it normally was. Literally, I mean, I'm not kidding. It was pretty amazing, actually.
But a few blocks west at the barbecue restaurant Salt and Smoke, customers have been slower to return.
And I get a lot of what's going on, and the need to protest and have your voice heard is really important. When it turned south and when it became destructive, you get really confused why it would happen in the Loop. The dream of diversity and inclusiveness has just been embodied in the Loop for 50 years, and the Loop has succeeded because of its diversity for almost 50 years. And so this is where the dream is working. This is where everybody comes together, and it is really inspiring. And to see that hurt and to see that have some destruction to it just is confusing. Why here? Why here where diversity really drives everybody's success and everybody works well together already? I didn't get it.
I'll throw out a couple of tweets here. One is, be strong, be loud, be peaceful. It takes one vile act to derail a movement. Expose villains so you are not villainized. And then somebody else said, when you protest everything, you protest nothing. They've cheapened protesting to the point where this is a non-story. Wanda, do people know what your message is?
People who want to know, and those who don't know, they don't know, and they're not going to know.
Does progress come without pain, without sacrifice?
Never.
No.
Never.
Is that what we're going through now?
No, never.
I disagree with that.
Never.
That progress necessarily has to have pain, because we are sentient beings, all of us. And sentient means we're sensing, understanding, recognizing. We know it if an animal is limping, we know that. We don't have to cause the animal to limp, we know that. We're sentient. We don't have to have pain before we do.
Can I give you some pushback?
Sure.
You know, when the body is in, it's a simple frame, you know, weak muscles, lots of fat, you know, the body is weak. It wants to remain lazy and lethargic and doesn't want to, but to make your body better, like a bodybuilder, you have to apply that pressure. You have to get under the weights, and you have to lift repetitively.
Do the work.
You got to do the work. You got to rip those muscles apart in order for them to grow and rebuild stronger, bigger, better. I think this is our St. Louis or our nation's collective body. We're going through these painful growth processes, and I think that in the end, we're going to be better. We're going to be stronger together. I know it's a catchphrase that a lot of these stations and stuff are using, but I think over time, as we become damaged, we're going to heal. We're going to be better and stronger at the end of it.
Robin, I'm going to ask you, do you think this community, the metropolitan area, can it change? Does it need to change? Can it get better?
I would like it to. I agree with this gentleman here about the only perfect one is Jesus, and I really believe that that is the way we could get through this without pain, would be because then we'd all care about each other and love each other. It seems to me that we just, in my opinion, and if you want to say white people or people that don't know or are blind or whatever it is to your cause, would be a lot more likely to stand up with you if you were standing up for someone that they perceived as an innocent or deserving, so to speak. It just seems like the only time the protests come is after somebody who has done something criminal in nature, and then you hang your hat on them. For instance, when the children of the black community are, you know, dying all over the country every day in drug deals and everything else, nobody's screaming about that. Nobody's walking around begging for these, take these drug dealers out and save our youth, save our children. But yet St. Louis, Ferguson gets practically burned to the ground because it was an altercation between a cop and a black.
It was not all about Mike Brown. That was
okay, but that's what we're missing of your message. That's what we're trying to get at here.
So
is
you
that
bring
we
up
don't
something
get
that
your
I've
message.
been,
We've all asked here, what is your message? And we're still waiting to hear it. And my thing is just advice, where you probably don't take it because you think I'm blind and don't understand anything, but
You are.
See,
You are.
yeah, and so are you.
Oh, I can tell you that listening to you and listening to you, having this dialogue or whatever you want to call it, I'm checking out. I'm like, this isn't productive. Are you two ever going to agree? Probably not.
No.
It's way more complicated than sitting around this table and trying to fix anything. You know, am I collecting things for protesters? No, because again, I don't know if I support them. You know, I feel bad for the business owners who have to board up their windows, you know?
And may I say something
How does that
about this?
help? How does that help
It's time
anything?
for people to take a stand. It's time
And
for
I
people.
agree. And I agree things
It's
need to
time
change.
for white people to take the blinders off.
And I think that putting all white people under the same umbrella isn't
All white people
productive,
aren't
and
under
that's
the same
part-
umbrella,
that's part
but a
of the
whole lot of
problem.
you are.
I think that's part of the problem. I think that more of us are in the middle and we get drowned out by the media, by the protesters, you know, people who really want peace in our community. Because
We don't
things
have
do
peace.
have to change.
We don't have peace.
But
we don't have
how
peace.
can you,
You can
if your hands are like
editorialize about
this,
white people,
how can
but
anybody
if I
come and
editorialize or
approach
the
you?
judge editorializes about a heroin dealer, we
You make
are
a good
racist
point.
and bad.
You make a good point. I understand what you're saying. You live a different kind of life.
I do. You're absolutely right.
And so therefore your thinking about situations is you're going to think differently about them.
And one of my quotes is I say, there is a way to be perfect. And it's to know that you're not perfect. To know that that there's always room for improvement. I think that is the best that you can possibly be.
We have to figure out how to work in between each other. We have to start figuring out, and I think we're doing a great thing here to start a conversation, to try to listen to each other. But that's why, you know, I'm not going to be 100% Blue Lives Matter, and I'm not going to be 100% black. Well, I'm always going to be 100% Black Lives Matter. You know, that's me. That's my son. That's my life. But what I'm saying is that nothing is going to be exactly one thing or another. It's going to be somewhere in between. We have to learn how to work with each other, and it's going to take a while. It's not going to be comfortable, and it's not going to be easy, and it's not going to be peaceful. But we're going to get to a point where we're able to live and grow and be better. You have to.
I want to thank all the people who participated in tonight's community conversation for speaking openly and honestly and publicly. I can't guarantee that everybody's point of view was heard, but we do want to continue to hear from you. We hold these sorts of conversations regularly without cameras and microphones, and what we hear helps us do a better job here at the 9 Network. If you're interested, you can find the date and time that works for you and sign up at 9net.org/conversation. Thanks for joining us. For Living St. Louis, I'm Jim Kirchherr. Coverage of issues vital to our region is supported in part by Emerson. I think we need to bring everybody back again.
I agree. This is getting good.
This is getting good. All right. I think we're going to break it up because I let you guys go home. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Well, I'm glad you do this.
What the protests brought was awareness and start a conversation. And guess what we're doing? Having a conversation.